Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone had a great week. We just want to jump in today. I want to continue on with where we were last week. Before we jump into our message, we're in a series on faith, sexuality, and gender, and so we're going to be on that for the next couple of weeks. But before we jump into that today, gather group leaders and everybody in the groups, I want you to. There's something I want us to start thinking about coming up over the next couple of weeks. Begin to put a little vision to it, and everybody's kind of start brainstorming within your groups. I was thinking this the other day. I know that some of us have been receiving incentive checks or things that have been hitting our accounts, which was maybe it was probably some unplanned for resources that went into your bank accounts. And so what I want us to think about doing is I want everybody to collectively in your group, as we become an expression of the gospel into our community, an expression of the fullness of who Jesus is, not only for whole body healing, for whole body, for peace and rest, but also in physical aspects. I want us to begin to brainstorm within our groups to say, okay, what is it that if we could pull some money together, everybody could throw a little bit of money in a pot in each gather group or each small group and begin to go, okay, what is it that we could do with this in order to invest in somebody? When I mean invest in somebody, I mean invest in, we were talking the other day in one of our groups about even like small business, like how is it that we can help somebody who just needs maybe some apprenticing, or somebody who needs to get some training, or somebody who we can mentor, or something we can set up in a small business. Just be creative, because what we want to do is we want to create the ability for people to, if they need something, they just need a push or need a little bit of help, is to help them walk through that. The easiest part about this whole process is the finances. Money's the easiest part. The most challenging part, and I want everybody to begin to pray into this, is how is it that we partner relationally with people that we know that need something, or they need part of who we are. That's the fullness of the gospel. When Jesus came, he not only healed people, he not only brought eternal salvation, but he also met physical needs. And so I just got to thinking, whenever the other day, when I began to hear that, when the relief money came out, it made me think, okay, a lot of us have, and not everybody, some of us may have already, we have great need for it, and it's not a problem. I'm not even asking it to be the resources. The resources just made me think about what if we were to begin to think in our gather groups on missional focus, and how is it that we would bless somebody and help them move further into their life so that it'd be a full expression of the gospel. So anyway, that's just kind of an aside. So begin there, and in your group, start talking about that, start brainstorming, and begin to think about how you want to do that. Okay, so let's jump in today. We're going to be in Luke chapter 18, and we'll be in the Passion Translation. And really what I want to do today is I want to focus on a part of Jesus and how he was brilliant at asking questions. As we encounter our culture, cultural norms, LGBTQ, all of the norms that we come up against in our culture, I think probably one of the greatest things that's lost is that we don't take the time to ask questions and get to understand and know somebody. And today I'm just going to talk about how we ask questions. Jesus in the New Testament, in the Gospels, he asked over 300 questions. And as he's asking questions, his goal for asking a question was always to reveal the heart of what was going on within an individual. And so when he would ask a question, he would say, what do you want me to do for you? In other words, somebody would be crying out for something, then he would ask the simple question, what do you want me to do for you? Even in the rich young ruler in Luke 18, the rich young ruler comes up to him and says, wonderful teacher, what must I do to be saved and to receive eternal life? And this is in Luke 18, 28, and Jesus says, "Why do you call me wonderful?" And in some versions it says, "Why do you call me good when there's only one who is wonderful or good?" And so he's always asking a question to get underneath our questions, and get to underneath. And so I want us to think about this today. And so I kind of want to open up here, and I want you to begin to think about how is it that we engage people in conversation, and how is it that we engage people with our questions. So practically speaking, I want you to think about right now, how is it that I engage people with my questions, and what's the motive of my questions? Are the motive of my questions to get to know you as an individual, or is the motive of my questions to set up a point to where I can actually say you're doing something wrong in your life, or am I asking you questions to get information from you? How am I asking questions? I've been counseling couples and individuals, my wife and me, but both of us for the past 20 plus years. And I've counseled anybody that's dealt with pornography addiction, to substance addiction, to same-sex attraction, to I'm angry all the time, to I'm anxious all the time, I'm depressed. I've probably counseled just about everything you can counsel out there and talked. And what I've found is the key is to always get to know someone, not try to fix an issue or to change something. Obviously, when we begin to sit down in a direct counseling setting, our goal is to understand what's really going on. And I want to challenge us in this, is that when we're relating with people who are completely different from us, and specifically, I'm going to say LGBTQ, because in the culture of that, society has painted everything so stark and different. Like, you don't want to hang out with those people. You don't want to be with those people. You don't want to be like that. And so there's these big social stigmas that sit around the LGBTQ. And remember last week I talked about Zacchaeus and how Jesus called him down and had this divine compulsion to say, I have to be with you today. I have to go with you today. And so that we can begin to have these divine compulsions to begin to meet and sit and listen. I found over time that as I've asked questions, I continue to ask questions, my goal is to understand what your life is about. It's like, why are you depressed? Like, why are you anxious? Why are you attracted to the same sex? What's it like to be attracted to somebody of the same sex? What's it like to wake up in the morning and have been in the gospel and know that there's a struggle there, knowing that you're dealing with, let's say, anger, or you're dealing with same-sex attraction, or you're dealing with pornography addiction? What is it like to begin to help unwind that? And like, when did that first begin? When did those things first start in your life? To understand the person, not even to fix the problem, to understand the person. And plus also, it's when we begin to want to understand somebody, as a person reveals things of their heart, which is what Jesus was always trying to do. Jesus' main aim, and I'll read this quote I was reading the other day. It says, if we want to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, we have to learn to ask questions the way Jesus does, to reveal hearts, to open up the hidden reality for others. In other words, the questions begin to open up hidden realities and actually roots of where things are. What I've found so often in any things that we challenge with in our faith, is when we're challenged in same-sex attraction, or we're challenged in how we deal with anger, or how we deal with frustration, or how we deal with anything that challenges in our walk with the Lord. As we're dealing with that, I find that there's always a story and a past and a beginning point. And so that we have to stop and understand what's going on, not just be taken off guard by what the fruit of an action is or what the fruit of something is, but actually to be understanding of what actually is happening in a person's life. So often when we don't take the time to ask questions to understand someone, it's we don't understand where they've come from. We don't understand what their life's really about. And, and sometimes we just get into a mode of, hey, I want to fix who you are. I perceive that to be something that you should not be struggling with, and so therefore I want to fix what you have. And so asking the questions is the key part. Now, turn to 1 Corinthians, because we're going to practice today at the very end, and you're going to just ask each other questions. You're going to try to get to know one another, because questions are how we understand who the other person is. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And this is the place we have to be driven from. Verse 14, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 14. For it is Christ's love that fuels us, or fuels our passions and motivates us, because we are absolutely convinced that he has given his life for all of us. This means all died with him. And so, and literally in some versions it says his love compels us, or it constrains us. It pushes us through a location. It kind of moves us. And so as we're compelled and pushed and moved through this through this point, back to Zacchaeus, is like we have this divine compulsion to really understand an individual. I think in our culture today, with how everything is separated with labels, you struggle with this, and you're this, and all the labeling going on. I would even say, even if we have the identities of political labeling and all of that, we never get to know an individual because we don't take time to ask questions, because their identifying characteristics begin to put us off and we don't engage the conversation. Now, I'll tell you partly why we don't engage questions at time, because when we actually don't ask questions, because when Jesus begins to ask questions of us, because you know that when we begin to open our hearts or trying to help somebody else open their heart, understand who they are, it begins to open our hearts up, and we begin to have to reveal who we are, because that's a two-way street. If I ask you a question, I freely know that you have the freedom to ask me a question back. And so I have to answer freely. And so it begins to have to open up the heart of what's underneath. And honestly, what happens in our lives is that we set up our lives in such a way that we ignore what the reality is. We can justify how we're acting. We rationalize how we're acting. We avoid things and avoid conversations. We even medicate to the point, with different parts of our life. We medicate things so that we don't have to feel them, so that we don't have to talk about them, so that they're just underneath the surface and they're kind of tucked away. And Jesus was always about asking questions in order to reveal the motives of our heart and to begin to reveal why we feel this way, or why we're moving out, and why we're saying the things that we do. So part of my challenge to us is, as we're dealing with social norms, like we're dealing with LGBTQ, is to get to know somebody. Get to know somebody for who they are as a person, not for how they identify and how they say they are. And so it's going to mean that we're going to have to enter into conversations, and we're going to have to begin to open up and talk to people and get to hear their hearts and actually enter into a relationship with them. So it means that we have to enter into a relationship with people around us, and the ones that we may not want to be in a relationship with are the ones that we say we don't want to have a conversation with. Jesus would have had a conversation. Go back to Luke 15:1. It says all the tax collectors and the sinners they were all attracted to Jesus, and they were drawing near to him to hear what he had to say. And so part of who we are, and part of who we are as believers in Christ, is that we're called to love, and we're called to ask questions. We're called to understand who the person is. And so it's going to require us to stop and ask questions and get to know an individual. All along, the counseling I've done through all the counseling I've ever done, people want to be known. They want to be known for who they are, not for who they think they should be, not for who you expect them to be, not for how they've missed the mark, not for any of that. They want to just be known for who they are presently. Until we're accepted for who we are in the present, we can't change into anything that God's calling us to be, because we have to be accepted at some basic level. We have to be accepted in love in order to begin to walk with the Lord and go, Lord, okay, I have some things that have happened in my life, and they've made me feel this way, and they've made me do these things, and they've made me act this way. I had a terrible household. My father abused me. My mother abused me. I was abused by a family member, by a cousin, whatever it is. And the manifestation of all these things that come out in our life is because something in our past or in our history past has happened. And it begins to create this place and these emotions and these feelings and these things that we don't know what to do with. And until we get to know one another and we sit down and have conversation, we can't even begin to touch and unwind what actually is there. Again, you go back to this question that Jesus asked over 300 questions in the gospel. Even with the woman at the well, he said, hey, bring me a cup of water, or bring me something to drink. Back in John 4, and you begin to think about that, what's the woman is going like, I'm a woman, what are you doing telling me to bring you something to drink? Like, don't you know who I am? Like, don't you know that it's not right for you as a Jew to me, a Samaritan woman? This is over in John 4. You shouldn't be conversing with me, and even this time of day, what are you doing? And see, Jesus is understanding exactly who she is, and he's asking her something that's going to invoke her to actually go like, am I actually being accepted and engaged by the very thing that hates me, or the very thing that says that I am unclean and I'm not right and I'm not nice? Jesus always knew how to connect and how to draw it out. And as people who are followers of Jesus, who have the Holy Spirit within us and upon us and have the life of Christ working through us, that love compels us. It should compel us. It should control us to actually and motivate us to look at people around us and to grab them beyond what our media tells us. There's so many things on social media, and I'm going to continue to hammer on this, and I hope you don't get tired of it, but there's so much stuff on how we receive our news today on our social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all the different things that we receive on Instagram, all those platforms, snippets of information, snippets of news, and snippets of, if you act this way, then this is going on. And we begin to form our framework of what our news and how we're informed about what's going on. And it begins to divide us, and we don't have the ability to even have a conversation. And so that's what I'm pushing us into right now. That's why I'm talking about asking questions, is how is it that we get past the false identities, the things, the labels that I'm this and I'm this. Okay, I don't care. You look like a human, so I'm going to sit and talk to you because the Lord has put this love within me, and part of that is loving each other. And to be known as those who love one another and begin to ask questions about, just tell me about yourself. Here's a few questions you might want to think about, because how to ask questions is important, and the motive behind why you ask a question is important. Some questions you may ask is, where'd you grow up in your life? What do you do for a living? So these are simple entry questions. How long have you been in town? What do you do? What do you do on a daily? What do you enjoy doing on a daily basis? And you just begin forming relationship. And you continue to form a relationship. You might meet somebody in a coffee shop and you begin with a small conversation. And then as we're praying for one another, outside of actually meeting together, the Lord begins to open up questions. And as you get in relationships and you start to get to know who the other person is, then all of a sudden, our lives begin to be open to one another. And then things begin to present themselves. And then we have the ability for the love of Christ to begin to open up the fact that we accept one another and we love one another. And then we're able to share one another's burdens. We're able to shoulder the burdens of one another. You go to Galatians 6, it talks about sharing the burdens, shouldering the burdens of one brother to another. And so we begin to get to that place where we're able to open that up and share and be a part. So asking good questions. So today what I want to do in group, what I want you to do today is I want y'all to, all of us to sit around and go like, what are good questions? Or let's talk about some questions that people have asked me before that have actually opened my life up. What have been questions, or who have I gotten to know in the past that's actually stuck with me long enough? Because the question that you want to talk about and ask one another, you don't ask on the opening question. It's because you begin to build a relationship, and then we can begin to open up things within our lives. And so some of the questions we want to ask one another, we probably don't ask, we don't have context for relationship. Now the questions that I ask my wife, we have relationships, so I can go right in and ask her a direct question, even a direct, deep question, because we have a relationship. So relationship, again, is going to be the key to asking the questions. But our motive has, again, to be 2 Corinthians 5:13 and 14, where it says we're compelled, we're motivated by love, we're controlled to reach out. So ask questions. And your groups want to get to know one another, you even know a little deeper, even share some challenges, what it means to have a relationship with one another and get to know one another. Because listen, we're going to meet people when we begin to have a relationship with them. They're going to look at us and want to know what our motive is. And if our motive isn't true and right, then that'll reveal itself as well. So as I close, I'll just caution you of one thing. And I mentioned it earlier in the message. I believe sometimes the challenge of asking others questions is that we have our own questions and our own things that we're not known by, that we want to be known by, or we have our hidden things, our things that we've rationalized away, we've avoided, we've medicated. There's a truth or things that have been ignored within our own personal lives that we feel like if we begin to relate to another, that those things are eventually going to come out. And so I would say this, is that as we prepare to ask questions and engage a relationship with others around us, is that we go before the Father and we get transparent with what we're medicating or what we're rationalizing or justifying, and get right before Him, and then get right with another brother and say, hey, these are things I've been talking to the Lord about to release, and this is part of what's going on in my life. Because when we release those questions and we can sit before the Father with those questions, and then we can sit before one another with those questions, when we come to somebody else, we have this boldness and this peace and this confidence that we're able to share a life that has had loss and pain and suffering in it, and we've actually brought those parts out transparently before another, and they've actually been dealt with, and that comes out when we begin to ask questions. People, at the end of the day, people just want to be accepted and loved for who they are. And so that's my challenge this week, is learn how to ask questions and begin to pray into asking questions. Also remember, begin to brainstorm about what you're going to do, what your gather group might begin to think about doing as a group. And I'll give some vision to that as we move forward. Have a great Sunday. Talk to you next week.
If